My senior year of high school was interesting, to say the least. There are some experiences from that time in my life that I'll never forget. Graduation and getting my high school diploma, becoming an Illinois State Scholar, senior research paper, which sucked. Getting locked inside of a locker. Oh, you don't believe that last one? Well, I'm not joking. I really did get locked inside of a locker during my senior year of high school. And in this video, I'm going to tell you the story of how that happened through very bad drawings and my usual awkward narration. Let's begin. Now, as some of you probably already know, I attended Joliet Central High School, and in order to graduate from this school, you have to pass 4 years worth of some sort of physical education related course. Instead of going into strength training or PE leadership, I decided to just take 4 years of PE. While I often wonder if I should have taken strength training instead, PE was great. In my senior year, I took PE 4, and, as common sense would say, I had to change into my PE uniform every day in the locker room. I usually took a locker next to 3 friends who I would play basketball or dodgeball with on Fridays, and those friends were Greg, David J., and David L. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. Yes, these guys are basically the reason why I ended up being in the locker, which you will see later. But they are not bad guys, they are not jerks, they are awesome guys. They just decided to play a prank on me and it went kind of awry. So, I am not trying to hate on them with this video. They are awesome, and I'm still friends with them. So, moving on. The usual kind of ruckus went on in the Joliet Central boys' locker room that I would imagine goes on in all boys' locker rooms across the country. Guys shouting at each other, some guys in the corner making stupid noises for no apparent reason, guys joking to each other, a bunch of cussing, randomly of course, and, my personal favorite, dodging water bottles that some dumbasses decide to turn into projectiles. Of course, that's still a lot safer than trying to dodge, or even drink for that matter, Rockdale water. Now, I should mention that, not long before the senior year started, the tiny, holy crap, how does anyone fit their shit in that thing, lockers, that used to be in the locker room, were replaced with much bigger, oh my gosh, these sure beat the hell out of those old pieces of crap, lockers. Now, getting back to the projectiles. One day, I was putting on my shoes next to David L., who was telling me about something that had happened to him in one of his previous classes. Suddenly, I heard someone yell out something to the effect of, "Oh man, I hope you don't throw that shit, man." Now, this was one of those things that caught my attention. I didn't want to get hit in the face with anything, especially if it was literally shit. Then I remembered the new, bigger lockers. I don't know what exactly compelled me to use this as my first line of defense, but my first reaction was to quickly crawl inside the locker, squeeze myself inside using a fetal position of sorts, and shut myself inside of it. Just afterward, I heard something hit the locker that I just used out of the place of refuge. After that, I got out and saw David L. laughing his ass off. I started to laugh too, because the water bottle that the kid threw just happened to hit the locker I hid inside of. If I were just standing outside of it, I would have been hit in the head. But that's not really what David was laughing about. As soon as I got out, he turned around and shouted out, "Hey guys! Steve can fit inside of the lockers!" Not long afterward, a bunch of other guys tried to squeeze themselves inside of the locker, but none of them can do it. I, Steve Jensen, the skinny little shrimp of the school, could fit inside of a space that no one else could. For a long time, I used this for many things. I hid inside of the lockers if anyone decided to throw anything, and every now and then, I decided to scare people by jumping out of the locker as they were walking by it, which usually didn't work very well. Now, this is the part where it gets interesting. One day, as we were changing, Greg's curiosity got the best of him. "Hey, does anyone really know what it's like to be locked inside of a locker?" No one answered, and I couldn't really answer either. I'd been inside of a locker, but I'd never been locked inside of one. I wanted to say that Greg should go see for himself what it's like to be locked inside of a locker, but Greg's a super huge guy. Not fat huge, just big and tall. Not even that, he's bigger and taller. So, him squeezing himself into a locker was kind of out of the question. Then, Greg looked at me. "Steve, let me lock you inside of a locker, man. I promise I will let you out." And I wanted to be all like, "Oh, hell no, bitch, you are not locking me in any of those lockers. You try to get me in one of those lockers and I'll hog Duke in your ass." But instead, I was just like, No way, man. But then David L. walked up next to me and was all like, Steve, if you let Greg lock you inside of a locker, I'll give you $5. And then I was all like, which locker am I getting in? So they take me to the second from the last locker on our side of the locker room, and Greg gets out his lock. He shows it to me, and I look at it, and then Greg looks at me, and then we all look at each other, and it just turns into a stare down, almost like the lock just grew a pair of eyes and started staring the shit out of me. Finally, I just crawled inside of the locker, got in the fetal position, and closed the door. The locker just had these tiny holes in the door, and I could see Greg locking it. And now I just waited. I stayed for a little bit and thought to myself, hey, this isn't so bad. But then I looked through the holes in the locker again, and I didn't see Greg. I could see David J. standing in front of the locker laughing hysterically, and I could only think, aw, crap, that punk did not just leave me. But then I thought, well, he's probably just messing with me. I'll be fine. And that was when David J. started walking toward the locker. He had a huge smile on his face, but he also looked a little bit concerned, like he wasn't sure what was going on. Then, he started to talk to me through the holes in the locker, and he said something that I will never forget. Man, I seriously don't know where Greg went. And that was when I looked forward, straight ahead, and said, shit. And I completely lost my cool. I started banging on the locker, yelling for Greg to come back and let me out, all that crap. Now I know what you're thinking.
It's not that big of a deal, Steve.
Well, when you're slightly claustrophobic, have been locked inside of a locker, are forced to stay in the fetal position because you can't really move, and the guy who locked you inside of the locker has mysteriously vanished, you are going to freak the fuck out. But that wasn't the worst part. I happened to look outside the holes again, and this time I didn't see the locker room, or anyone else inside of it. What I saw was David's ass pressed up against the locker. Now, I can't be too sure, but at that moment I thought I heard the sound of a fart, and I started to smell some weird shit in that locker. And at that moment I could only scream louder. On top of being smushed inside of a locker with no way out, the tiny space I was confined to was also probably now being filled with fumes coming from whatever David had eaten for lunch. It was at this point where I thought, I'm gonna die. Then I saw Greg. He was back, and he was just starting to unlock the locker. But it was one of those times where the lock doesn't unlock on the first try, so he had to do it a few times. And when that lock was finally out of there, I flew out of that locker and was like, sweet open spaces! Sweet fresh air! Ooh, the joys of being on the outside! Sitting in the locker room, of course. And no, like I said before, I don't hold any grudges against these guys. They're still my friends, they're awesome, their prank just went a little bit out of control and scared me a little too much. So, the moral of this story? Trust no one in a locker room. Alright, that's pretty much it. Hope you guys liked this little story of high school shenanigans. Scoobert YTP, out.